Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Rules, Roles, and Responsibilities for EdTech Integration. Today's webinar is sponsored by NetRef, which is a powerful internet management tool that helps keep students on task and ensures that online learning is safe and productive. Before we begin the program, I'd like to review just a few quick housekeeping items. We will be accepting questions throughout the webinar and we'll hold a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You can go ahead and send in your questions as they come up for you using the questions feature in your control panel, and then I'll put them into the queue to be answered during the Q&A. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use that same questions feature to get my attention, and I'll do my best to resolve the problem for you. We will be sharing a recording of the webinar along with the presentation slides with you after the webinar today, so keep an eye on your email inbox tomorrow for details on how to access those materials. They'll also be posted on the NetRef website, which is net-ref.com. Now let's get started. I'm pleased to welcome today's speaker, Dr. Monica Burns. Dr. Burns is a curriculum and EdTech consultant, an Apple Distinguished Educator, and founder of the popular blog and website, ClassTechTips.com. As an educator, Monica was part of her school's federal magnet funding leadership team and was a vocal advocate for bringing one-to-one technology into her fifth grade classroom. Realizing the power of tech tools in the classroom, Monica started ClassTechTips.com to provide a resource for educators and administrators on implementing EdTech in the classroom. Since starting ClassTechTips.com, Monica has presented to teachers, administrators, and tech enthusiasts at numerous national and international conferences, including South by Southwest EDU, ISTE, and EdTech. She also visits schools across the country to work with pre-K through 12 teachers to make technology integration exciting and accessible. Monica is the author of Deeper Learning with QR Codes and Augmented Reality, a scannable solution for your classroom, and hashtag Formative Tech, meaningful, sustainable, and scannable formative assessment with technology. Monica also has several other books coming out this year, so you'll want to keep an eye on ClassTechTips.com for more information about those. She's a graduate of the University of Delaware and Hunter College and completed a doctorate in global education leadership at Lamar University in 2016. We're very excited to have Dr. Burns with us today and are looking forward to the insights and all of the information she has to share with us as we start to head into the new school year. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the program over to her now.
Thank you so much. I am excited to be here with you all this afternoon to talk about our topic, Rules, Roles, and Responsibilities for EdTech Integration. Of course, if you have questions for me after today, you can always reach out, Monica at ClassTechTips.com, or give a shout out on Twitter as we're talking, or reach out after today at ClassTechTips as well. So let's jump right into our agenda for our time together this afternoon. And if you have questions as we're going through, please put them into the question box so we can take some time out at the end to make sure all of your questions are answered. Today, we're going to talk about best practices for technology integration, strategies and models to support staff members, whether you are in that admin role, directly responsible for helping guide some of the movement that's happening with technology integration, or you're looking to support your peers and other staff members in your building to help them come along with you on an EdTech journey. We'll talk about some of the ways that you can share models and experiences with them as I share some stories as we go through this afternoon. We'll talk about a few different type of device management structures and routines that you'll see in schools. This is especially true when we dive into steps for developing a plan and thinking through all the pieces that you'll need to leverage a variety of devices. Since I know when I travel to schools and host professional development in different places, even if I come, with the understanding that we're going one-to-one iPads, there's always some Chromebooks floating around and vice versa. So we'll talk about how you can think about device management and developing a plan to manage a wide range of devices in one district, school, or even in one classroom. And then we'll think back down to the school level and some actionable tips for integrating EdTech within classrooms and between different classrooms at the school level. So we're going to start off this afternoon focusing on best practices for technology integration. What does it mean to integrate technology in a way, and these are my three big words I use all the time, in a way that is meaningful, so it really counts and gets to what your goals are for students and their learning, so that it's sustainable and it lasts beyond just one day or a couple quick activities, but becomes part of what you're doing all the time, every day throughout classrooms, schools, within a district. And I say that sustainable happening every day with that caveat that from a logistical perspective, that might be tough if you have only a Chromebook cart on Wednesdays or something to that effect, but we're looking to make it meaningful, sustainable, and then scalable. So what do we have going on in small pockets and corners in different classrooms that we can show off, share, and just make sure it shines bright so that other folks in your school and district want to jump on board, and you can scale all of the changes that you're looking to accomplish when it comes to thoughtful technology integration. And so although we're thinking about that throughout our time together this afternoon, we're going to anchor some of these conversations around some different models, some best practices for technology integration. And we're going to jump right in with the SAMR model. And you may be familiar with this really popular way of thinking about technology integration. Dr. Ruben Puenedera, whose name is down there in the bottom right hand of the screen, is credited with bringing this to life and thinking through, giving us some vocabulary to think about different types of technology integration. So some schools use the SAMR model really as an evaluation tool to break down a lesson and say, which level of the SAMR model is it addressing? I like to think more about using the SAMR model as a way to spark a conversation about the variety of ways that we can use technology to address learning. And so when we talk today about EdTech integration, what our responsibilities are for thinking about making things meaningful and sustainable and scalable, the SAMR model is a place that I like to start. So we're looking at this as kind of a hierarchy of where you can go when you've spent some time really thinking deeply about the way you're using devices. Substitution is pretty easy to do. Tech acts as a direct tool to substitute without much functional change. We're doing the same kind of thing we were doing before, right? We're flipping flashcards as we practice math facts, but there's no functional change. Nothing really substantial has changed. We're substituting what we've always done when it comes to integrating the technology. Augmentation takes it up a notch. The tech acts as a direct tool to substitute, but there is some functional improvement. There are some things that we just couldn't do before without the technology tool. Modification allows for significant task redesign, giving us ways to turn students really into creators, having them make a product to share. And redefinition is really all about what we couldn't even have thought of before our students opened up a laptop or touched the screen of a tablet, something that's totally inconceivable. For example, the idea that we could have students, right, do a close reading of a book, create a book trailer that uses icons and imagery to tell the story and persuade an audience, and not only change up what we did in the past, but now share that on social media, connect with a classroom across the world, tweet towards an author and engage them in conversation. So something that really would have not been conceivable when it comes to using technology in the past. The next model we can use to think about this is the TPACK model. And you see again kind of the breakdown as we go down the page. And you can head over to tpack.org for a lot more information on this particular model if it's one that you're using to spark conversations within PLCs, within teams of teachers at your school. So the content knowledge really comes down to the subject matter, what it is that you're actually teaching. The pedagogical knowledge, the methods of what teaching and learning looks like, what it means to bring students into learning experiences and impart knowledge by creating those opportunities for them to explore and analyze and evaluate within the classroom. The knowledge that one has around technology. What does it mean to work with a particular device? And then we move through building this up to get to that place of effective teaching with technology, where the pedagogical content knowledge, where teaching, learning, curriculum, assessment, and reporting are strong, or technological content knowledge, where there's a connection between the technology and that subject matter learning, that content knowledge. Technological pedagogical knowledge, where we're identifying how teaching and learning can change when particular technologies are used in particular ways. And then, of course, bringing it all together with the technological pedagogical content knowledge, making sure that our effective teaching with technology is happening across subject matters with an understanding of what teaching and learning looks like and an understanding of the nuances and power of different types of technology tools. I also want to share my ACEs framework, which is featured in my book on deeper learning with QR codes and augmented reality, and also on my new book for ASCD coming out this fall on tasks before apps. And this ACEs model is one that we can use to think about different ways that technology is being used. So you can think of the SAMR model really as that hierarchy of moving towards redefinition, our TPACK model of really pulling everything together with content knowledge, understanding of best practices for teaching and learning, and understanding of how the tech can work to facilitate all of that. And then this ACEs model, ACEs framework that I introduce in my writing breaks down different use cases. So for teachers who are having conversations, and your role might be to lead these conversations, to jump in and support teachers as they're exploring these different types of EdTech integration, this can help lend some more vocabulary to your discussions. So when we use technology as an access point, students can easily and efficiently locate content hosted online, to find information, to answer questions, and connect with others. When we use technology to curate resources, students interact with resources handpicked by their teacher that relate to course content, student interest, and even those individual needs of learners. So curating content to get those just right materials to students. One of our roles, whether it's as a classroom educator or someone supporting someone as a classroom who's a classroom educator, helping teachers make the most of what they can access by curating those just right materials, engaging students with technology. So students use technology tools to build transferable skills during hands-on learning activities that require them to create products and collaborate with others. So engagement, not just hook, I gotcha, but your hands-on learning in the flow, in the zone of learning. And then, of course, using technology to share student work. So students now can connect with that authentic audience for their learning, setting a purpose for their work, and connecting their creations to the world outside the classroom. Now, you don't have to be a SAMR school or a TPACK school or an ACEs school, right? When I bring these to start our conversation, it's really about laying a foundation so that when you are talking with your colleagues, no matter what your role within an institution might be, you have the vocabulary, you are thinking through the different ways that one can use technology to impact student learning in a really meaningful, sustainable, and scalable way. And of course, our conversation on best practices for technology integration would not be complete without a mention of the ISTE Standards. And you can head over to ISTEstandards.org. They do the double slash with standards/standards. And that way you can find the standards as they break down into 5 different categories. So no matter what your role is within the ecosystem of EdTech integration, there will be things there that can help you really think about what particular responsibilities are attached to each role. And the ISTE standards are great for unpacking in PLCs or bringing into vertical or horizontal planning across or among grade level teachers. So the ISTE standards are set for student expectations, for educators and classroom roles, for administrators who are thinking about things from a building or district level, for coaches who are supporting both educators and admins, and then computer science educators who are looking at things from a bit of a different angle when it comes to best practices for using technology. So if you are thinking to yourself, what's my role in all of this, and what are my responsibilities for a particular movement of thoughtful technology integration in your school or district, this is a good place to break down those individual roles that are true to your responsibilities, as well as thinking about how the different models and frameworks we started with can help facilitate conversations around those short and long-term goals you're setting within a school and building. So some strategies and models that you can use to support staff members. And there's a few different things to think about as it relates to the pieces we've mentioned already. If you are in a staff support role where you are the coach within a school or district, whether you are a team leader, whether you are the person who is piloting a new program and tasked with explaining your thoughts as you go through, there's a few different ways that you can support teachers in that capacity. But we're going to focus right now on thinking about a very popular model for technology integration that comes back to our big idea on being prepared for no matter what type of devices you have, and being responsible for kind of a rollout and support for staff members as that is happening. So we're going to look at some different types of blended learning models for bringing technology into a classrooms, whether you have one device for every student, 4, 5 devices in your room. And a great resource I want to give a shout out to if you are thinking about either 3 of the ones we'll spotlight or other blended learning models is Blended Learning in Action, a practical guide towards sustainable change, and that's by Catlin R. Tucker, Tiffany Guykoff, and Jason T. Green. So I like to give a shout out as we kind of think about some different models and strategies that you may want to bring into your school as you support staff members with thoughtful technology integration. So within blended learning, there are a few different ways to take what is happening traditionally in a classroom and elevate that with digital tools that you might have access to. And so for the different models we'll think about together, there'll be pros and cons, not just generally, but as it relates to your specific goals for supporting staff members with technology. So as much as I might highlight some of the benefits of a particular model, when you're thinking about your role and the responsibility you have for supporting staff members who are either in the classroom next door to you also teaching 4th grade, or a team of teachers that you're overseeing and supporting, you'll want to find something that doesn't just sound the best, but sounds the best for you and your colleagues. So a station rotation model is one that we've been doing in a school that I support in New York, not too far from where I'm based, which is the station rotation model. And so in this model, teachers are supporting students through small group instruction. There's online learning taking place. There's collaborative small group work and work that's independent and differentiated. So in a station rotation model, you might have a device for every student, or you might have a handful of devices in one station. So you might have one station where students are jumping into online learning. They might have an adaptive program they're logging into that's going to give them a baseline assessment that's going to allow them to answer a series of questions, and the artificial intelligence within that particular tool will help adapt a pathway or identify targets for students to work on. If every student has a device, they might be bringing their devices to a handful of stations. So a station rotation can start off with a teacher-led mini lesson for the whole group, or it can jump right in to a rotation model where students have a particular place they're going to start, and then a rotation that takes place on a timed cycle that, of course, would be dictated by the number of groups and stations you have and by the time that you have to work with students. So typically in a station rotation model, no matter how many devices you have, there is one teacher-led small group instruction that the students rotate through. So by the end of a class period or the set time for station rotation, every child will have spent time one-on-one, right, in that kind of small group, checking in with their teacher, so they have that teacher-led small group instruction. It might be differentiated, so you might have a group of students moving through together, and they're then coming to that small group teacher-led instruction with a group that's homogeneous, and all the students are going to be working on something similar or at the same level as their peers. Or it might be a heterogeneous group where the teacher is taking through students on a very similar journey when they meet with the small group during the rotation. In a station rotation model, as I mentioned, whether there's a handful of devices that kids share or a device for everyone, there's typically an online learning or adaptive station where kids are jumping into a tool that might be for their individualized pathway, might be a review of content, or a way for them to practice something that they've already explored either with a teacher in previous days or that day, or an extension activity. Within the other stations, there's flexibility to design learning experiences that are engaging, that are tech-rich, if everyone's going to have technology, or might not be tech-rich. So remember, this is a model that's really popular when there's only a couple devices, but I can share with you from my own experience. I work with schools where every student has a device and they are in the station rotation model, maybe using tablets at a station, maybe not when they rotate. So typically there are stations where the collaborative or small group work is taking place. So students have a task that they're working on in a small group with clear instructions laid out for them. And then there might also be a station where the work is very independent. Students have a child sitting across for them for support, but they are working on something independently, and it might be a differentiated or tiered task within station rotation as well. Another model is the whole group rotation. So here there's a teacher-led whole group activity. Everyone is together. It's whole group instruction for a portion of the lesson. Might include a collaborative or breakout activity, but everyone is doing essentially kind of the same thing led by the teacher. Then the rotation happens with the whole group. So everyone then goes to their own device. They then jump into an online learning platform, something that is adaptive and personalized to them. So right away you can probably tell, right, that small group rotation is very popular if there's only a couple devices, and you might have like a technology-rich station for online learning that just a few kids will participate in at once. A whole group rotation, students will all go off to their devices to work on an online activity. The teacher may have chosen different activities for particular students, or the tool that they're using may have identified areas of need as well. And another popular model that, as you're thinking about what kind of expectations you're going to set and what you're bringing in to students, is a flipped classroom model. So a flipped classroom model, the kind of popular term around this is making the shift from a teacher being a sage on the stage to a guide on the side. And so in this environment, students are using whatever ed tech they've got, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet, a computer at the library, a Chromebook, or a laptop. Off-site, out of classroom time, they are consuming content. So it's an inverted model. So instead of the teacher being that sage on the stage and lecturing the class, they are sending lectures and content home. So it could be a tutorial they've made with a screencasting tool, or it could be a video they've found online. So students are watching, viewing, reading content at home, and then when they come back together as a class, the teacher is that guide on the side. They're facilitating discussions. They're supporting a project-based learning activity. This can also be self-paced. So you might have students who are interacting with that content at home that is different than what another child in the class might be. This is popular for students who are in middle and high school, but there's definitely content and teachers in an elementary level who are exploring this model as well. So in these three that I shared with you, the idea is that you're thinking of different models and ways to bring technology into classrooms in a way that is structured, that there's a plan, and no matter how many devices you might have in your classroom, that you are and your teachers are really being thoughtful on what is going to be best for the students that you're working with. And so this really transitions us into thinking about device management structures and routines for schools. So you might know, for example, that you have 5 Chromebooks per grade level, and you are going to do a station rotation model of blended learning. And every class is going to have 5 Chromebooks every day, and you're going to deploy them so that each teacher has those 5 Chromebooks, and the teachers are going to set up their station with an adaptive tool so students can jump in when they rotate and share those 5 Chromebooks. Well, your device management and structures are going to be very different than a school that has one-to-one devices, where every child has an iPad and they use them at different points throughout the day. Teachers incorporate them into interactive whole group lessons as opposed to small station rotations. And there's no I don't mean to come across as putting a preference, right, on one of these at all, right? There's a reason that schools go in different directions, whether it's one-to-one or BYOD or having a mix of devices or access to just a few. It's more about acknowledging what logistic constraints might be present in your building, what your models are for thoughtful technology integration, and using that information to develop a plan and set the roles of different folks in your building to dictate the responsibilities of your stakeholders when it comes to having devices as well. And so it's important to have an understanding of what management structures could be in different devices and different device management structures in different schools, so that as you are either making a purchasing plan, taking inventory of what you already have, or doing the best that you can with what you're able to bring together, you really are thinking about what it are your next steps moving forward. And so in a one-to-one classroom, students typically have a school-issued device. This means that someone somewhere, whether it's a business admin, it's a team made up of families, of community members, of teachers and students and admin, have come together to make a decision. Typically, it's a school-issued device where each student has their own. So one device per one student, the one-to-one. The same device across grade levels, schools, and districts is often the case, but not always. And each student has access to a device that's assigned to them. So it's their personal device they're going to use all year long. Sometimes schools will let students take that device home. Other times we might use the phrase one-to-one to say, I have 300 students in my school, we have 300 iPads, we're one-to-one because everyone can have their own device at one time. So I spent my last 2 years in the classroom in a one-to-one school, in a one-to-one classroom. Now, I was one-to-one iPads, but other grade levels were one-to-one with laptops. So it just depends on your way of implementing that one device per student. And so sometimes there's a play on this term one-to-one. You might be 2-to-1, where there's a laptop and a tablet for every student, or you might be 1-to-2, where the ratio is that you have 50% devices based on the number of students enrolled in your school. So when there is a school-issued device, whether it's the same device across grade level, school, and district, or a couple different devices, then it really comes down to that responsibility at either a building or a district level to configure and set up devices so that there is a management structure in place for managing what goes on devices. If you're downloading apps on Apple Configurator for iPads, what websites student has access to on Chromebooks, and what different features may be turned on and off, like a webcam or a microphone, for example. So when schools or districts are one-to-one, the management tends to be more centralized as opposed to one teacher in one classroom kind of making decisions about how to load a set of tablets with apps or which Chrome extensions to have set up for students. So this one-to-one structure, of course, can vary, and in different schools will look different, but typically we have a school-issued student device, same devices across maybe K2, maybe different ones for 3-5, or 6, 8, 9, 12, and each student can have access to their own device. So connecting it back to our conversations on different blended learning models, what you do in one-to-one school might be very different than what you do in a BYOD or few and mixed device school. So a BYOD is a bring your own device initiative. Students bring their own device to school. There's often a mix of devices, so a couple kids might have Chromebooks, a couple kids might have iPads. More often than not in a BYOD, you'll see that a school has established certain parameters, like these are the 3 approved BYOD tools, and there's a kind of a common one that everyone or a couple students can pick and choose from. This tends to be easiest from a management perspective if you do set some parameters, because then you can have common apps, common websites, and establish different use cases for the different devices. However, some BYOD schools simply allow kids to bring their device if they happen to have one, and that means that you might have high school students who use a cell phone in their pocket to compose a video or to record a song, or you might have students who bring in an iPad from home a couple days a week or just on special project days. So it really depends on how this is not interpreted in terms of what the word means, but more in what BYOD means for your school, your goals, and your community. Often in schools that do have a BYOD program, there will be something set up so that students who may not be able to afford to bring their own device do have access to devices, whether that's through sales established or coordinated, I should say, by the school, donations or devices that are present so that students may, have a device they can sign out or access in order to make the most of having tech during the school day. So BYOD can look very different in different schools depending on what type of rules and expectations are established, what kind of responsibilities are given to families for participating in a BYOD program, and also what's been just kind of established as the why we're using technology tools and how that's been communicated to both staff, students, and family stakeholders as well. So another model, I should say structure, that you may see that comes into play when you are making decisions on how you're going to manage different devices is what to do when there are a few or a mix of devices in your school. And more often than not, or as I mentioned before, if I'm brought into a school to help them think about how to turn their students into creators with Chromebooks, right? Maybe that's our topic for a PD day. I'll come and many teachers will say, well, I also have an iPad. Can I do this on an iPad too? Or if someone's device isn't charged and they pull out their smartphone and they want to jump in and try with that too, right? That becomes something that is then part of the conversation as well. So when you have a few or you have a mix of devices, this is something to take into consideration when you are planning for technology integration. So you might come back to that conversation, or the point I made earlier about in a station rotation model, you have 5 Chromebooks, every teacher uses those 5 and kids rotate. Well, there might be times where teachers want one-to-one, right? Want that one device for every student. So in those cases, you might have students who are, or classrooms, I should say, that go on a rotation so that some days everyone in one class has devices, and then they share those with another grade level team member. So there's like a classroom of rotation of devices, so that there may be days where every student are jumping in and wanting to have their own device. So you can kind of think about it from 2 different standpoints. It might be station rotation where you have 2 iPads and that's what's there in your tech station, and students are collaborating when they get to using those tools. Or you might have activities where you want every student on their own device, so one classroom won't have any technology tools one day because they're rotating, they're pooling all their resources to have a classroom rotation. So that's just kind of a different take on what might traditionally happen with a few or a mixed type of devices in station rotation. So if you do have a mix of devices, right, you have those handful of Chromebooks, handful of iPads, you got a grant for this or a grant for that, and you have a mix of things, whether you're doing a classroom rotation or a station rotation, you'll start taking the same type of mindset as a BYOD school. So if I know that half of my class is going to be working on this type of tablet and the other half on this type of laptop, I'm taking the same mindset as a BYOD teacher, even though those devices might belong to the school. And I'm thinking about what type of open-ended creation tools work on both devices, or what type of activities can students jump into no matter which device they're using on a particular day. And so with both that idea of having a few and having a mix of devices in a school, you will want to take into consideration having a plan for sharing devices. And so there might be clear schedules set up so teachers know that they can participate in a classroom rotation. So they'll be one-to-one every Tuesday because that's their day for getting the cart of that particular type of device. Or they know that you're typically in a station rotation kind of model where every class has a handful of devices that are just for them, and not enough for everyone, but for 5. And there is a plan in place for when a teacher does want to go one-to-one, they know how to request more devices, how to reach out to their colleagues so that they can bring in more devices into their classroom. So I want us to think as well as we move through these ideas of just general best practices and models for tech integration, what some of the roles and responsibilities are as you are making a plan for day-to-day instruction, and what some of those roles and responsibilities are as you're making decisions around what type of device management model you want to have, our one-to-one, BYOD, or few and mixed devices. We also want to make sure we're thinking about how this can feel actionable right away, because for some of the things we've mentioned, those are kind of big ideas, right? We want to think about how we're going to deploy devices, what type of devices we're going to purchase, depending on different types of models for instruction that we're going to take, how we're going to integrate some of the frameworks and models or those ISTE standards I mentioned from the get-go. And in order to do that, really thinking at the school level and what you can do kind of tomorrow in your plans to make things feel really actionable. And so within these kind of 4 categories we'll talk about today, the first one is creating pilot teams, so groups of teachers who will go off and try a new tool and report back and go through the process of seeing if something works for your students and your school culture. Our PLCs are learning communities where teachers come together to explore different topics, to dive into conversations, to have an action item that they're focused and working on. To create partners in tech is what I like to call it, which is having your folks partner up and have their go-to person as they bring in new technology and new initiatives into their individual classrooms. And then, of course, having a plan for strategic professional development and what that can look like. So we'll jump into thinking first about our pilot teams. So in this case, you are having students, or having teachers, excuse me, think of what they want their students to be able to do with a particular tool that they've found, and how they think that they can really elevate their students' experience by using this particular tool or particular model. So more often than not, these folks are encouraged or self-selected to be part of a team that's going to try out something new, stick with it, so commit to participate, and then share and reflect on whether or not this is the right fit for a whole school implementation. So I worked with a school in Tennessee a few years ago, where the teacher teams had all chosen a different type of LMS, right? They were looking to see which one was going to be the right fit. So there were teachers on each grade level who were trying out a different one than their grade level colleagues. This was their way of saying, do I like this? Do I think it's a good fit? You know, it wasn't just one person trying one thing. There was a couple teachers who could say, this worked for me today, or that didn't work. They could troubleshoot together, and they could talk things out. So you might have self-selected or highly encouraged folks jump into pilot teams to try something new. This could be a vertical pilot where you have a couple teachers on different grade levels trying the same thing with their groups of students. So you might have a fourth grade teacher, a seventh grade teacher, a ninth grade teacher trying out a similar tool or strategy. Or it could be horizontal, where maybe you have 3 second grade teachers trying one thing and 3 second grade teachers trying something new. It's really all about that commitment to participate. So they're really going to try it out, this new thing, even when it gets hard, when there's a stumbling block or an obstacle. They're going to see it through to make sure that this is something they've really given some due diligence for. And they are kind of accepting of their role to turnkey the how it works to their peers, to share their experiences not just with their colleagues, but also with the folks who might ultimately make a decision on adoption, and to reflect on what steps might need to happen in order to make the adoption of a new initiative or tool more successful. So pilot teams can be very important, have really important responsibilities when it comes to shifting thinking about EdTech integration. The next piece is PLCs. So within these groups of teachers, they come together on a grade level team or teachers with common interests that they want to explore. They may have a specific or set goal that they're going to discuss. So what is it that they are kind of coming together to think about? There's periodic check-ins and group meetings as they tackle a big idea that they're kind of trying out, exploring, and reflecting on. It becomes a support network of people who know who they can go to when they want to talk something out. And then when they come together, they have deep dive discussions. And so circling back to where we started off today, where we talked about, say, the SAMR model or the ACEs framework, you might have teachers come to a PLC and say, you know, today we're going to talk about the SAMR model. What are some things we're doing in our classrooms that fall into these 4 different categories, and what can we do to push our thinking about trying something that just wouldn't have been possible without technology in the past? So you're having these kind of deep dive discussions around a topic to really think about the different ways that you can bring in all of the best practices around technology tool and shift some of that responsibility onto all of the stakeholders in your school as they work towards that kind of thoughtful integration, if you will. Partners in tech, you know, instead of our partners in crime, that's what my take on it is, at least. This is really all about finding your person. You might not know who it is right off the bat. It might be someone who is far away, or you might partner one staff member with a staff member in another school within your district. It could be vertical, so it might be a couple 6th grade teachers who come together with a similar goal or to bounce off ideas from one another, or it might be horizontal, where you have a 9th and a 10th grade teacher who bounce off ideas and they teach the same content area area, so they're kind of in that zone together. It could be something that feels more like a mentor or mentee, trying things out and supporting one another as you go through. Your partners might have a specific goal they're working towards, like they both want to make sure that they're honoring student curiosity with technology tools. It's not like they're piloting a new tool to do that. It's more that they're shifting their mindset and they want to talk it out with someone else when they have ideas, when they try something new, when something works or when something does not go well, and they want to reflect on it. So your partner in tech really becomes your person who's your support system. Now, for those of you on today who are classroom teachers, right, your numbers are better for finding someone else in your building. There's just more of you all, right, within a particular space. If you're kind of the lone director of technology in your district, your partner in tech might be someone who is within your space, maybe has a similar or different role, or you might find someone that you connect with on social media who's a director of technology 2 towns over or 3 states over, and they become your person, your check-in, your go-to when it comes to moving forward on this EdTech journey together. So I know some folks who both when, these kind of virtual PLNs or professional learning networks, or who have their person, their go-to, their partner in tech, they might use a tool like Voxer, that kind of walkie-talkie, to check in with them over the course of a unit of study or a couple of days of trying something new. They might send a quick text or a message in a Slack or a space where teachers are connecting to kind of check in and over the course of a couple days or within a couple times during the day as well. As well as we think about our tips for integrating EdTech at the school level, it's also important to think of professional development planning. Now, this can take place in whole group, small group, or individual. As a PD facilitator myself, I get to travel all around to different schools in different states, supporting professional development with education technology, and it can take many roles. And I want to make sure it's clear there's not one that's necessarily better than other. It really depends on the needs of the group. So it might be whole group. Everyone in your staff is really excited about getting started with a particular mission. It's a whole school initiative. You want to kind of give everyone the same vocabulary. Then you might break out into small groups, so things that are really around individual interests and needs. So you might have teachers who want to make sure that they are developing their students into strong digital citizens, excuse me. You might have teachers who want to make sure they're elevating the opportunities for students to create. So those become pockets of small group for professional development. And you might have individual teachers who are going to be coached one-on-one, who are going to have demo lessons, who are going to really talk something through with the person who's offering professional development at your school or district level. Now, the important thing to think about when planning for professional development is that as a school and district, you'll have both short-term and long-term goals, right? Part of your 5-year PD plan, part of your 1-month or 2-month PD plan is going to look different. So acknowledging that it's a process, breaking things down into shorter term goals can help you reach those long-term goals. And then of course, the most effective professional development is that of which is sustained, that has follow-up. So although you might have that whole group one day, getting everyone excited and an opportunity to come together around a common goal, then the follow-up might be within small groups, it might be within individuals, to make sure that that is something that is sustained over the course of the school year. So to circle back to kind of our big ideas for today, when we talk about rules, roles, and responsibilities for EdTech integration, you really want to think about those best practices for technology integration, maybe your responsibility to share some of the models for tech integration that your district is going to come around for a common language. You may decide to focus in on different instructional models as opposed to a set of standards, where you are talking through how you're going to address different types of learning or rotations or technology use. Really taking stock, being reflective, and making decisions on what's the best way to leverage a variety of devices, one-to-one devices, whatever structures and routines make the most sense for your particular logistics at your school. And then, of course, choosing some actionable tips that I shared for integrating educational technology at the school level to bring that into practice in your school building. So I'm sure that there are some questions, but I hope that you were able to think of some things that you can take back to your particular role and translate and kind of transfer over to those folks that you work with on your day-to-day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burns, for sharing all of this with us today. We definitely got a lot of content crammed into this 50 minutes, and we do have some questions that have come in. So, folks, if you've got questions, go ahead and send them in. We do have time to do a Q&A. Before we get to that, we're just going to let Dr. Burns take a little minute to take a break as we thank our sponsor, NetRef, for today's webinar. As Dr. Burns shared with us, educational technology is a really powerful learning tool, but it does create some classroom management challenges for teachers and for IT directors. NetRef is a simple-to-use application that provides every teacher with the ability to choose which websites and apps their whole class or individual students can access at different points in the day. So it works really well in that BYOD and one-to-one model that Dr. Burns talked about. Teachers can also see what websites or apps students are using at any given time. So you can see if students are on tasks when you're doing independent learning on those devices. For the IT directors and coordinators in our audience, you can monitor website and app usage both at this class and school level and use this information to demonstrate and evaluate how technology tools are being integrated into the school day and which of the resources you've invested in are really being used the most and you're getting that ROI from. NetRef works on any device and doesn't require any downloads to individual devices, so it makes it really easy to use and manage, again, especially if you're in that one-to-one or BYOD environment. You can learn more about our sponsor, NetRef, and request a quick demo of the software by visiting net-ref.com. So we hope you'll take a minute to do that. There'll also be a link to the NetRef site in the email you'll receive tomorrow with the link to the recording and the slides from the presentation. All right, Dr. Burns, are you ready for a few questions?
Absolutely.
Great. So we got this asked in a couple different ways, which was, do you have recommendations for handling different levels of technology comfort and knowledge among teachers? Yeah, that's a big question.
It's a great question, and I think it's really important to think about the assets your teachers bring to the table, right? Everyone is here because they believe that they are capable and willing to devote the time and energy to grow students at any age level. And so bringing that kind of conversation into any type of technology integration is really important. So when I'm sharing with teachers best practices or tips for integration, whether I'm on the ground or virtually, for me, it's really important to help teachers identify or notice problems that they have that technology can help solve. So I try my best to put it into context of everyday things. So for example, if you're working with a group of teachers who are resistant, they don't see the purpose of why you're using a certain tool or introducing something new, I think it's really important to be reflective on how we're communicating why we're bringing this into a classroom. So for example, if you're working with teachers who have students who are English language learners who are conversationally proficient but struggle to write stories in a traditional way, showing them how a technology tool can really capture student voice and help students build confidence is a great way to help them get their foot in the door for thinking about other ways that technology integration might be useful. So I would say even if you do an interest survey or a quick survey that has nothing to do with tech, like what problems are you facing every day to your staff at the beginning of the year, it'll give you some language that you can use to bring into conversations that happen to do with how technology integration is going to be used in your school.
That's a great suggestion, especially right now as we're all gearing up for back to school, but making sure that technology is really solving those problems, not just being used for the sake of usage, I think is a great suggestion.
Yeah, and it really connects back to some things we all think about as best practices for students, right? We want them to see the purpose for their everyday experiences in the classroom, and so we want to set that purpose for all members of the school community.
Yeah, exactly. That's another good point. We have a specific question, and maybe you can just point to some resources for this, about where to find some guidelines for rules and procedures for elementary students when using Chromebooks.
Ooh, that's a good question. So there are some schools that will come together and kind of crowdsource ideas for what they anticipate as being challenges and what expectations are going to be within a particular classroom for using different devices. It's definitely worth, if you're looking for something that's more about device management and like having students and families commit to safe searches or best practices or something along those lines, finding a district that is one-to-one already or uses devices in that way already. Many of them have their kind of action plans or rules and expectations posted on their specific website that you might be able to, ask them for some advice, or if you can tailor some of the great work that they've done already, or at least to get some inspiration for what challenges other folks have come across if it's something that's totally new for you.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And in my experience, educators who have kind of already conquered some of these challenges are generally really happy to share their experiences and help you maybe not suffer quite as much as they did in trying to get up and running. So yeah, definitely reaching
Definitely.
out.
Yeah, and it's if you're looking for something that's a little bit more like playful, like what are the best kind of anchor charts to have in my classroom so kids know what to do when they pick the iPad out of the cart, you could always head over to Pinterest for some really great inspiration there. But for more of the technical stuff, looking at things from more of a district level might be a better spot for inspiration.
Yeah, for those more formal policies and procedures. This is a question about P cubed or public-private partnerships, and just kind of really wanted to get your opinion on when corporations want to, basically offload their older technology, and what your opinion of that kind of program would be.
So it really just, there's so many variables that kind of go into that of what that might look like. I think that first and foremost, it's great to have a large range of devices, and that's a wonderful kind of thing to enter into, but you want to make sure you're prepared for that. Mostly because if you are able to get your hands on a large number of devices, say, you want to make sure you have the infrastructure that's set that's going to support that. And by infrastructure, I mean more specifically about, wireless networks as well as the personnel infrastructure to really make sure that this is the best fit and it can be managed and handled. That would be probably my biggest kind of piece of advice is to make sure you're thinking about kind of long-term implementation of new devices that may come, from some type of donation or some type of arrangement where someone is sharing tools or making a donation is, that can be wonderful, but you want to make sure that you have the folks in store to manage that from a hands-on perspective, and then the building infrastructure to make sure that you can handle what that's going to do to your networks. If it's going to be something that's like a huge shift, you just want to make sure that the planning process is really in place for something like that.
Okay, and it looks like we've got time for just one more question. Um, When it comes to BYOD and one-to-one, do you have any recommendations or research behind really when students should have that kind of full-time exposure to technology? So at what grade level do you see one-to-one being most effective?
So I've seen one-to-one, all the way down to kindergarten where everyone has access to their own device, but they might not be using it all the time. If you head over to the American Association of Pediatrics, you'll be able to get some guidelines specifically around, screen time and what's appropriate for students at different ages. But I think more importantly than that, not to say it's not important, but, with all of these discussions about who should have a device in their hand, when and for how long, first and foremost for me is why, right? Why are we giving any device to anyone at any part of the day, right? Is there a strategic plan in place for what this is doing to elevate learning experiences? And then kind of stepping back and making decisions based on that information. So when it comes to kind of saying, this fits better, this fits there, there's definitely popular models like having tablets at primary levels, having computers with a keyboard at upper levels. I caution that a bit because I think tablets can do so much at all grade levels with kids being portable, kids being able to capture things on the go, and sometimes our push for keyboards is solely to make sure that we're giving kids devices they can test on, and I don't like that being part of the decision-making process, but I understand that that's the reality in schools. So it really comes down to me thinking, what are your goals generally for technology integration, then more specifically at different grade levels and maybe in different content areas, and making decisions based on that information.
Great. Well, thank you so much again for sharing all this information and the insights that you have brought from all the different classrooms and schools you've worked with over the years. Just as a reminder, everybody, you will get an email tomorrow with a link to the presentation deck and the recording, so you'll have access to share this with colleagues or to take notes on those presentation slides and start to implement some of the suggestions that Dr. Burns has. And of course, you can always reach out to her directly or through classtechtips.com if you'd like to ask any more questions directly of her. And her website has just tons and tons of resources about educational technology and lots of other topics. So we really appreciate Dr. Burns being with us today and sharing all of her wonderful information.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Have a great afternoon, everyone.